Welcome to the adventures of self. Conversations with ordinary and extraordinary people as they explore what it means to be self-expressed. Come on in. Join the adventure.
So welcome, Christina Kottori, to the Adventures of Self.
Thank you, Taylor, for the invitation. Hello, everybody.
Hello. Yes, it's kind of weird when you and I sit here and it's kind of like saying hello to this kind of amorphous thing, group, individuals that are somewhere out there. And it takes me to this idea, like, we're going to be talking about myth and archetypes and these things that we kind of assume they're out there, but it's not like Corfu or London or like a desk or a computer. You can say, oh, here it is. This is, I can touch it, I can see it. And to listeners, a bit like archetypes, they're out there somewhere, but we may not exactly be sure where.
Exactly. Well, in a way, the archetypes live through the stories that have been told for years. So we can find them first like written, and in the same time, we can find them in every man.
Yeah. And I think it's what brought us together is this idea and this real interest in this concept of archetype, this the etymology, right? This something, a type, a condition, a proclivity. It's something that is arc, right? That is above, that is over us all. And as you say, that can be found in everyone, right? There are these seeds or threads of who we are as humans that seem to go back thousands of years, if not before. Thousands of years, as you say, we have written history, and then perhaps tens of thousands of years into the oral history of these types of ways of being, of attitudes, of personalities that move through us.
Exactly. It's like an imprint. It's like an energetical imprint. The archetypal imprint is a behavior of a tendency of humans that has been unconsciously repeated throughout the centuries and the years. And then we realize that there is some archetypal imprints that exist for all humans, whatever cultural background or country they're from.
Yeah, I'm sure there may have been other precedents, but the one that comes to mind that I've studied the most is Joseph Campbell, who wrote The Hero with a Thousand Faces, right? And he looked at this idea that whether it was in Greece, in ancient Greece, or whether it was with the Mayans, or whether it was the Hopi Indians, or the peoples of Papua New Guinea, everywhere around the world had not only a hero myth, but a hero myth that had almost the exact same steps sequencing in it, which is quite remarkable that there are these these ideas that go through all of history, all of civilization, that seem to these like hidden underlying threads of what it means to be human and on this journey, in this life. What does it mean for us? And I think in many ways, we've lost real connection to that. The myth is still there and the threads are still there, but individually and in our sort of more daily understanding, we've really lost those threads.
This is very true, because there have been social standards that have been teaching us how is the right behavior. and that has restricted or constrained us into right and wrong behavior, and then suppressed a lot of the archetypes we enhance we have inside.
And just to sort of pick through it a bit more, because I know we talked originally about like the language itself, right? I mean, I'm assuming archetype is a Greek rooted word, and you've studied ancient Greek, so can you pick that apart for me, for us?
Yeah, archetypo is archi, it means the beginning, the initial, and then typos is type. So is the initial type, let's say.
It's like having a blueprint. It's like we have a DNA structure, and so we have a blueprint of something that guides us.
It's true. Yes. And we have many.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's right. It's not just one, right? So we have many. And I mean, in your understanding, what's the purpose of having these archetypes?
The archetypes helps us to have an understanding about ourselves. It's a way, because we work a lot with vision. We like to visualize. It's a way for us to understand better. And archetypes and myths helps us through a right brain way to understand the way we work as humans. And it's a way of knowing ourselves. Like the ancient Greeks said, outside of Delphi, there was this sign that says, know thyself. This is like the highest thing a man can do. And by understanding that we are like so vast, that we have so many faces, we understand ourselves and we know ourselves better.
Somebody said to me once that they'd read a book about all sorts of religions and spiritual traditions that had looked at what was the most common understanding or thread or precept that went through all of these. And people, I think there was even like a poll or something, and people thought it was love or other things, God or whatever. And in fact, it was what you just said. Know thyself is the most common root of all religions and spiritual traditions. And in a way, right, because we have this understanding, I think now, that spirituality or religion is something that connects us to something outside of us, right? This idea that heaven or some place is outside of us, and we're not connected to it. And the vast majority of spiritual traditions and things going back hundreds and thousands of years, those were intimately connected to us. So we only had spiritual traditions because it was a way of connecting back to ourselves.
Exactly. And Taylor, is like the more we understand ourselves, the more we realize that we're not wrong, we're not bad. Like there is all this guilt and shame that prevent us from actually loving ourselves, knowing that ourselves really put down all the walls in order to love ourselves. And this is like the the ultimate enlightenment, to really like love who we are. And this is heaven on earth for me.
Yeah, and I think this is touched on in a number of kind of new age ideas, but it's definitely not a common way of thinking, because we have such a, as you say, our social structures, our whatever cultural structures put moral judgment on things, and so we get very caught in this is good, this other thing is bad, this is right, this is wrong, and it becomes something that's really put on from outside of us, and we don't come to that understanding for ourselves. So we take on things that that may or may not be true for us, but we just assume that they're right or wrong, and it could feel quite oppressive, right? And we stand for things that, because our fathers told us, or our mothers told us, or teacher told us, or our country, our jobs told us this is right, without really having that curiosity, that investigation ourselves.
Exactly. It's like we are inserted this a program, which is like stories, and we work our ROM, let's say, memory based on these stories that we were told. And some people have the courage to seek deeper and unlearn. And, it's beautiful. It's an adventure when we go there.
Yeah, unlearning, because I know you speak about sort of this idea of remembering what we knew, generations ago, thousands of years ago. And I've had other people on the show talk about this sense that we have, and it goes to this idea of archetypes. If an archetype is there and always has been there, but we don't give it power, we don't give it energy, we don't give it currency. That idea of currency, it makes it current, but also the electrical current that flows through something. If we don't give it that currency, it sort of lies dormant and doesn't, it doesn't realize its potential. And there are these other forces, which, particularly right now, we have a lot of corporate forces, right, that are their intention is very much about making money, and so you can see a lot of stories that are manipulated to archetypal stories that are manipulated for a particular purpose, rather than having them be part of the sort of public lexicon, where people can really explore what is this myth really about.
Exactly. And there is always like a superficial way to see a myth of like a fairy tale that once happened and occurred. And my invitation is always to go deeper into the esotericism and the symbolism. And there has been manipulation, I think, in everything, and also the myths. Like sometimes I read the Greek myths as they are now narrated or written now, and it doesn't resonate. I'm like, this doesn't resonate, and it feels like there has been distortion, of the myth. It feels it has a patriarchal, could say, like for example, in the Greek mythology, that Hera is the jealous one always. Like it doesn't really resonate so much.
Hera, the wife of Zeus.
Yes.
But and so remind me of her other sort of areas of power and focus.
Well, she's a queen, and she always had her animal symbol is the peacock. That has, like, when the peacock like opens its tail, it has like all these eyes, and it's like the sky, like the eyes of the universe, like the stars. So she's like, I consider her like this cosmic mother that has like eyes everywhere.
And I mean, there are, when you say cosmic mother, I mean, that to me harkens back to much older goddesses.
Yes.
And so oftentimes what would be happening is that that archetype for a cosmic mother, which maybe even originated with chaos, or I'm not sure, but something in an older, because they had sort of the Titans and even older gods and goddesses before the Olympians, that the Heras, the Zeuses, and so often the archetypes are getting, because I think people can get confused because they hear a particular myth and they think, okay, well, as you say, it's a fable. This is what people, and I think there's an assumption, this kind of naive assumption, that as great as the Greeks were, they built these wonderful buildings, they made great art, they created democracy. They went sailing around the Mediterranean and, you know, navigated all these places, but that their view of the world was quite simplistic, that they believed specifically that there were these gods and goddesses that ruled this, and that this actually happened, and that this myth was a factual representation of something that happened.
The beautiful thing with Greek mythology is that the fact that the gods have also desires, have also, how to say, like passion. So the gods are also human in the same time. They're not like gods, you know, like that we put on a pedestal. So the gods had humanness in them as well. And it's not only the 12 gods, because there are also many other semi-gods, or, you know, like nymphs. So there is a big variety of the way they were choosing to describe the world they were seeing, but in a more poetic way, or like right hemisphere way, let's say.
And those, I mean, the myths, even though there are archetypes or threads that go through time, they are changing, right? I mean, with time, with culture, with a particular you know, group or tribe or peoples, those myths change, they develop, over time.
Yeah, I mean, we can even start by breaking down the word myth, which it's mythos in Greek, and it means mio, so ethos. So I initiate to ethos. I don't know if there is this word, right?
Yeah.
And so it was always a way, like the mysts were using the myth to initiate people into like more esoteric understanding. And they would say always that the myth had so many symbols that only those who were ready would perceive. So the myth is made like this because it's only for those who are ready to understand the depth, let's say.
I remember reading a book by Idris Shah, who writes about the Middle Eastern and Persian myths, more like the dervish side of things. And there's a character, I think may even show up in Greece, but it kind of shows up in a lot of places, called Mullah Nasruddin, and I think he has different names. And he spoke about this idea. It's like, well, though the stories often had three different meanings. So you had a very superficial meaning that it was a cute story and you might get a laugh out of it. And then there was something that if you really sat with it, there was a second meaning that had a bit more of a life lesson, right? It had a deeper meaning. But then there was a third meaning that only the initiated, only people who had real inside knowledge could actually understand what this was about. And it goes to this idea, like so you can read a myth or listen to a myth and say, oh, okay, this is a story about Hera and Zeus, and Hera getting jealous, or, you know, Zeus doing this or Apollo doing that, or whatever it is. And you take it sort of at face value. And then there's a lot of, over the last, I don't know, 100 years or so, there's a lot of, more modern psychological interpretation of the myths. And that's an interesting thing that's occurred. And then there is this, I think what you're saying, there's another deeper understanding of something that goes to, like this initiation of who I am, of who we are as humans. Goes back to know thyself, right?
Exactly. And this is how, like, the ancient Greeks were using actually myths to initiate people into the ritual, the mysteries they were creating. And for example, like the biggest mysteries in Greece happened in Athens every year. this time, 14th of September until 23 of September, for 9 days, where it was actually an initiation to death. This was like the biggest celebration of the Athenians, happening for thousands of years. And this was guided by the Hierophants. And the Hierophants were guiding many hundreds of people in caves under the temple of Dimitra. And through different initiations, like being in the dark for 9 days, not eating, being scared, or other that we don't even know because it was forbidden to say, to reveal. And there, like after on the 21st, on the equinox, the Hierophant would guide them into the myth of Persephone, which is the goddess of the underworld. She goes to the underworld. And this is how they would, like go into this journey through this myth. And they would drink also, like the sacred potion they were making that time and going on this journey. So they had like this multi-layered created rituals to initiate people.
It's talked about in other places. There's this one of the things that feels like we've lost, and you can see it in a lot of ancient populations and in many indigenous populations today, this sacred connection with everything that is. So with the seasons, with the change of seasons, with what it means to be alive and dying, right? The sacred appreciation that everything is sacred, that we're not separate from it. And I've said on other occasions and with other guests, it's kind of like really one of the things that's kind of ripping apart what I think is really missing in our world is this idea of the sacred. And whether it was was the Eleusinian mysteries, and you had the Orphic mysteries and Orphic mysteries, and all these ideas connected us to it was a way to, you were talking about, to initiate somebody into an understanding of what it means to be human.
Yeah, and this is what the remembrance lies right now, is to remember that we all are spirits, we all are spiritual. Like no one, because there is this language like, oh, spiritual people and non-spiritual, we are all spiritual, but some remember and some have forgotten. This is the difference. So we all need to remember that we are spirits. We're not only flesh, and we're just having this human experience, but we're all spirits.
I'm curious a little bit about your own journey that's gotten you to here. I'd like to continue the hearing about, because I can talk about this stuff for a long time, for days. It really is interesting to me. But yeah, I'm just curious, like how you got into this, or were you raised as a priestess?
Not really. Like the seeking started very early in my life, as I had like very difficult situation in my family, and I felt a lot of depression since I was a child. So I was always seeking a way out of it, like a way out of the pain. And this is how I started actually to go into therapy for when I was really young, since I was like 19, and then to have like a better understanding about myself. And then after years passed by, and then I started to meet beautiful people that were also seekers or teachers. And the first teacher I met was Georgis, this beautiful man, a very beautiful teacher, that he had written like a theatrical play about the myth of Persephone. And I was acting in this theatrical play. And that was the first time in my life that I was just reading it and I was just crying. It just like there was so much understanding about life that I was bursting into tears. And that was my actually first like meeting with Greek mythology, and how much with the depth, let's say, with the depth of it. And then after that, I met another beautiful woman that was actually my teacher's wife, and she did these beautiful seminars, like drama therapy seminars about the Greek goddesses, the Greek goddess archetypes.
Mm.
And then we went into this women circle. We were like 13 women, and we got into this beautiful journey, diving into the archetypes.
Mm.
And that was for me my spiritual awakening, let's say.
Mm. Is there much of a renaissance in this in Greece these days? Do you get a sense that this has been lying dormant for a very long time, or has there been threads that have been held together by a line of people for thousands of years, or has it been kind of lost and now people are coming back to it, and where is that now in Greece? Because it's so amazing, right? We have all these myths and a lot of written representations of that go back to 2000 2500 years ago, or something like that, and yet it feels like, in a way, I don't know because I'm not Greek, but that some of that was lost for a very long time.
It seems so. Like sometimes we also Greeks wonder what happened to that light that was living here through our ancestors, what changed. And the truth is that there have been people that have kept continuing weaving the thread, and they have been less, but I think they've managed to keep alive the spirit. And I think now in this time, and especially after 2012, now it's there is a renaissance, like more astrologers and more like also people start to bring this up, this wisdom, this knowledge that it's there, it's dormant, and it's we don't need to learn something new, right? Like it's all there, all the encapsulated wisdom. We just need to remember.
Yeah, beautiful. And how are you, because you use this in your life, right? In your personal and your professional life, you're incorporating this into all sorts of creations and opportunities to bring, I think, to revitalize, to bring life back to these myths, to make them current, to make them understood, to maybe in some way actually initiate people into these myths.
Well, my experience has been a lot about coming into the body. I'm very intellectual person, so I'm really like very good here. And what helped me a lot the last years is to come back to the body. So I did like yoga teacher training, and then I did a lot of dance, and then tantra, and then I realized how important it is to bring the body also into this remembrance, and because it's like philosophy that has thrived in Greece is a lot about like talking about things, and usually people talk about the myths and how nice they are, but I wanted to go in another level, and what it is to actually embody it, what it is to actually feel the way this god or goddess felt in this myth or story, and the way I want to bring it now in the world, and I'm working on it, is to bring also the element of the body and the movement with the feeling also.
And yeah, what is that? Particularly for like somebody listening, because I think, I have this sense of, I have a very intellectual side, And I also think about, well, how could I bring this experience? So let's take a particular myth, because I know you're very connected to the myth of Persephone, which some people may know, but I mean, we can give just a quick overview of it, and then how we go about sort of bringing that into the body, because it's as you say, I mean, it was formed the basis for the most widely used initiation in ancient Greece.
Yeah. So actually the myth is that goddess Persephone, who is the daughter of Demeter and Zeus, Dias, she wants to go in the world of the mortals, and she wants to find love, and she's like this maiden archetype. So she goes to the world, and she finds this flower. She falls in love, and it's Narcissus. So she falls in love with Narcissus, and she cuts this flower, and then the earth opens into two, and Pluto comes on his chariot, or Hades. In Greek mythology, we usually use Hades as the place, and Pluto as the person, but sometimes, yeah. So he comes with his chariot, and he abducts her, and he takes her into the underworld, and there she is being taught by Hecate, which is the queen of the underworld, the secrets of the underworld, and why is it so important for Persephone to love Pluto and to marry Pluto. And at the end, she decides, because Hermes comes also, and he's like, okay, I talked with Zeus, and you can stay here for 6 months, and you can come up again 6 months. That's the deal. If you marry Pluto. So Persephone is like, okay, like, I'm in. Let's do this.
I mean, because there's some. I mean, I'm just remembering a couple of elements as well, because her mother, Demeter, is heartbroken, right? That her daughter's been stolen, and so she, as the goddess of not the grain, but of vegetation, or of, what did you say?
Yeah, like cultivation of
Yeah.
plants and everything. Yeah.
So she just stops, and there's no food. She just stops and says, well, fine, nobody will be able to eat anything, and that's not very good. So Zeus and I guess Hermes kind of have to come to this agreement, because I'm really curious to hear your interpretation, because the reason that Persephone cannot come back to the world on her own and just stay there is because she has taken fruit. She's taken a piece of pomegranate or something from the underworld, so she cannot leave. It sort of that's a and there's a lot in, there's all this symbolism that kind of goes with that. And we have this idea that the underworld, Hades, is hell, and it's this awful place, right? But Pluto's symbol, his is the horn of plenty, right? Cornucopia, which has this wonderful bounty that's available to us, and the underworld is this idea of, and again going back to modern psychology, I understand sort of this idea of the unconscious and all these riches that are available to us.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, she eats a fruit from in the underworld, so it's like this symbology that she becomes a part of it in a way, and that's the trap, let's say. But it's also like a choice, because as you say, is this unconscious part of our soul that we need to explore in order to come back to the light. And Pluto in Greek means wealth, and that's why it has as a sign the cornucopia. It's abundance. It's being rich. So the more you explore and love these dark sides of yourself, the more you help them become lights. And this is actually the way, like the ancient Greeks were teaching through these myths, that there's no way of getting enlightenment without going from this circle, like this circle of life.
And so that goes to the overall sense, because so just to kind of round out, so I think you said it, but just to kind of make a point. So then Hermes brokers a deal where Persephone is allowed to come back and be with her mother for 6 months of the year in the world, and she has to go spend 6 months underground, which goes to this, sort of explains in a cute way why plants don't live all year round. But that's kind of the superficial level of, okay, here's a description of something, a story that happened. But let's get to sort of some of the deeper levels, and then particularly then how you bring that into the body, because I can hear that story, I can intellectualize that story, I can think, oh, that's an interesting story, and maybe I can go into some psychology, but as you say, it's very up here, it's very in the head. It's not something that I live through and I enact, that I don't embody.
First of all, it is my intention, because I believe everything starts from an intention. So I put an intention on the space. And this is like my transmission, that I am now here to create a space for people to experience something transcendental. And then I open the space through invoking, in ancient Greek, the goddess, and I bring the spirits, and also I'm guiding people to prayer, so they feel actually the spirits. And then through, let's say, one practice would be breathing. So that would be a practice that would help people to get out of their brain and trying to understand the myth, and to kind of like bring the presence in the now. And then, for example, it could be a guided meditation where I would guide them into going to the cave where Persephone was abducted, and then to see that like with their imagination. Also, because I've studied acting, I would use theatrical exercises with people to enact some scenes from the myth. And also it could be like some tantric exercises to bring them more into the heart and to meet, let's say, their mother, right? In this phase of Dimitra, to meet the mother or the daughter in another person, and to just have this feeling like how breaking like for a mother is to lose her daughter, right? To lose your child. So it's going into the emotional body, I would say, like taking people out from the mind and going into the emotional body and working with the emotional body, and also like through movement to understand. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. And in that, there is this sense about what the myth ultimately means, right? This, as you say, we are in this, we live, or we exist in the circle of life and death, right? And we had on several months ago, we had on a friend of mine who started a business of turning graveyards into forests. So rather than planting people who died in graveyards, which is kind of what we normally do, is to actually make them as through chemical processes, make them food for trees to grow, and really understanding, it's like life requires death. We don't like to think about it, and certainly what's happened over the last year and a half, this sort of global issue, that it's kind of brought to light that people do actually die, which I don't think anybody's eternal and infinite in their current form. So we all have to come to grips with what it means to die, and these myths and these things give us this embodied understanding. Yes, we're alive, but we will die, and that understanding and appreciation for death is meant not to bring us down and be morose and sad, but to say, so here we are, let's make what we have here, right, to vitalize the life we do have.
Well, it's very true what you said, and it's a big link, a big bridge with what is happening today in the Greek mysteries, because actually the initiation to death was an understanding that if you die before you die, then you understand that you never die.
Mm.
And our fear of dying actually sometimes prevents us from living, because we're always afraid of dying. So what the ancient Greeks were doing through these Elysian mysteries was actually initiating people to death so they could live freely. And this is what we like, it's very needed right now, because people are so afraid to die, because they forgot that the soul never dies.
Mm. Yeah, it goes back to what we were saying. It's like we have this physical experience, but we're spirit. And here we are. Here's Christina. Here's Taylor. But there's an essence that lives on, that has always been, which brings us back to this idea around the archetype. This beginning type, this essence that has always been there. I think I said to you, it feels appropriate to bring it in here. I read a definition of myth. I don't, it may have been Campbell, but I think it was somebody else who I read said that a myth is something that never happened, in the sense that it's not a historical factual event. So a myth is something that never happened but is always true, which on the surface sort of feels a bit like, well, that doesn't make any sense, but it has a much deeper understanding, because it's not about this sense of, we in our left brain, right, think, well, if we're going to talk about something and tell a story, then it must have happened. It must be a factual thing. But the whole point of myth, the whole point of these archetypes, is that it, as you say, it connects us to a different part of our brain, of who we are, that is not about getting the facts right. It's about living the spirit, the energy of it, and realizing that that's available to us.
Exactly. It's about like going into this hologram of consciousness that was encapsulated in this form of a myth, let's say. And is what you say is it has many levels for people to understand,
And what's another myth that you would like to bring into this space?
The myth of Eros and Psyche is also one of my favorites. And
please tell.
And it talks about something very important. So we have all experienced in relationships sometimes this lack of trust, and it's always like the fundamental for a relationship to work, for Eros. So this myth actually talks about that if you don't trust Eros, like Psyche was taken to this golden palace, and she said that she was never allowed to see her husband, and she had all the servants working for her. She had everything. And then every night she would go to bed and she would sleep with her husband. And then there came a time that her sisters started telling her, like, who is that? And maybe it's like an old man, maybe it's a serpent. Like, how can you not just, know who is that? And when one night, she was so curious and she lit the candle and went over him, she saw the most beautiful man she had ever seen. It was Eros, the son of Aphrodite. But then like this drop of candle fell onto his arm, and then he walked up and he told her, like, you lost me because you didn't trust what I said, you know. And then he left. There is this like beautiful statue, like Eros, and like Psyche trying to hold Eros that he's flying.
Oh yes, yes, I've seen that. Yeah.
So it's about cultivating this trust when we commune in Eros with someone, you know.
And I mean, it's interesting, you know, I had forgotten, I certainly didn't have that myth in conscious memory, and those two words, right? Those archetypes, eros, right? The archetype of erotic love and this passionate love that we feel for somebody, and the psyche, our mind, that tries to figure it out, that tries to say, well, this is it, or this is how I define it, or let me see it from this particular way, and then I know it's there.
Yes, exactly. And it's always like the fear of surrendering totally to that it's holding us. And this myth talks a lot about to surrender and to trust, like in the dark, she was in the dark, so to trust actually the unknown, because we're also always, when we get in a relationship, we're so afraid of the unknown, like, what am I doing, I don't know, what is that, you know.
Yeah, there's something, there's a sort of an initial edge, because everything has to, you know, we're kind of caught up in how wonderful things could be, but we quickly realize that, as you say, we don't actually know. We don't know the other person. We don't know what's possible. We don't know what will happen. We don't really know anything. and there's a part of us that wants absolutely to determine and say, okay, I've nailed this down, and you, this other person, you're going to do the things that I want and expect when I want them and how I want them. And, you know, sometimes we do create relationships. I mean, two people can create relationships where it has this, okay, we've agreed from a very early on, or maybe relatively late on, you know, that you know, this is it, right? These are the bounds of our relationship, the walls of our relationship. And, you know, not to knock anybody for the choices or decisions they make, but, you know, it's like, what is that coming from? Because if it's coming from, you know, a determination, you've done all your exploring, and now, because at some point you do have to maybe set a measure, right? Like if you want to build a house, right? At some point you have to say, okay, I've surveyed the land, I've gone through all the plans, and now I've got to lay the cornerstones and start building the house. But sometimes, you know, we just say, well, here's a cookie cutter house, and I'll just take that for what it is. Thank you very much. It makes it a lot easier, and I don't have to think about it. And the same's true kind of with a relationship. You know, it's like, are we just saying, well, this is what my mother and father had, this is what society tells me, these are the things that should make it safe and known, and
you said the magic word, safe.
Yeah,
we want to feel safe, and sometimes Eros doesn't feel safe because there's so much unknown.
Eros definitely does not feel safe. I mean, yeah, I can speak from personal experience. And, you know, sometimes that doesn't work out. You know, I mean, I was in a marriage, got divorced, you know, there's like, there is this Eros that you put so much into, and then it's like, no, it's heartbreaking. But, you know, we learn from that. And you know, I can speak for myself. Like I took many years that I wanted to stay safe in something. I'd been hurt by Eros, and so I wanted to stay safe. So I built up walls and protections and assumptions of being safe, but it also felt quite lonely, and there was like this longing to get back to that Eros. And when you do, there's the reminder, it's like, oh, right, this isn't safe. Not safe, it's not known, right? Because
And
what is safe, right? We choose that for ourselves.
exactly, and it's not fun in life if we don't dare, if we don't take the risk. Like, what if it's safe? Like a friend of mine said, okay, like wear your pajamas, get into the case. How do you say, like when you die?
Oh, the casket. Wear
Yeah,
your pajamas in the casket.
just to be
Okay.
ready, just to be safe, and then
Yeah.
wait for death. It's very safe.
Yeah. I got you. Yeah. Yeah, we can just sit around waiting for death. That's a very safe way to handle things.
Yeah, exactly. Or then just live and have fun and dare and jump into the unknown over and over.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what's a good way for? I mean, because you've obviously gone quite deep into myth, and I'm quite interested, as you know, which is what drew us together. And I like to kind of explore. I've always been very interested in myth, and I try to use it in my work, and love to talk about it. For people out there who don't have that much. I mean, because it can feel, I think sometimes can feel quite sort of overwhelming. It's like, well, here's this woman, she's from Greece, she studied ancient Greek, she studied drama, and it's kind of part of her life. And maybe somebody can come take a course or learn from you, but also people what not only what can somebody do, but what's the opportunity for somebody to start to connect with, to explore archetypes, to explore myths. What's the riches, that are waiting.
That's a good question. The riches is to feel, let's say, to have like a wider perception of himself,
Mm.
a deeper awareness of who he is and why he reacts to certain things in his life, to a better understanding of himself, and a heart opening also, like to release some walls, like some beliefs, some thoughts, some ideas that are holding him from love. And always after my workshops, people are like so open in their heart, and there is this like I don't know, pivot point that happens. Yeah.
Well, I really love that idea around heart opening. I hadn't really, I hadn't, maybe I was being very heady about it, because I did sort of have this sense, like, knowing myself and getting better understanding. The heart opening is really interesting, because I think as you were speaking, what it got to me was, and you spoke about this earlier, this idea that, the myths and the gods and the goddesses, certainly in Greece, although they're called gods and goddesses, they actually have very human tendencies and attributes. I mean, they're always kind of doing, they're always sort of screwing things up, getting into trouble, and then there are mortals who are doing similar things, all the kind of hubris and the Icarus and excessive pride that creates a downfall. And like, there's a sense that I get from myth also, if we accept that these are archetypes, that these are things that are common to us all, it gives a sense of, I mean, curiously, it actually gives a sense of safety or awareness, because oh, this is a common thing. We all go through this. We all have the pain and uncertainty of Eros. Wow, that's not me, Taylor. That's not me, Christina. That is, everybody has this, and so yeah, it's interesting, because I think in that awareness, that to me, that's where I'm curious, or to me, that's kind of where a heart opening comes from, because there's a relaxation of knowing that this is so universal.
Exactly. And it's to understand that actually there's no separation between what is God within me and what is human within me.
Mm.
And there, as you said, that also the gods in ancient Greece, they were messing up and they were doing all things, and they were still gods.
Mm.
And this is a reflection of who we are.
Mm.
We are enthea onda, like divine beings. We have God within. And this is the remembrance, to remember that this is not something outside of us, it's something within us.
Mm. And sorry, that word, I just remembered, is that that's the root for enthusiasm? Yeah.
Exactly. It's entheos. En is in ancient Greek, and theos is God. So when you are enthusiastic, when you are in enthusiasm, you're actually connected with this divine spark within you.
Hmm. Yeah, it's so beautiful to have this connection. And I think you were saying, I mean, even modern Greeks don't necessarily have it, because ancient Greek and modern Greek are I mean, obviously the same root, but there's so much more richness in the language, in the ancient Greek language.
Yeah, it's definitely a spiritual language. And when someone studies, for me, it's like a transcendental experience. You go there and then you like, it's like, whoa, whoa, oh yeah, yeah, everything makes sense now. Like it's like, wow, so much wisdom. I mean, how did they think of that? You know, it's always like that.
Yeah, I mean, particularly, I guess, coming from because you speak modern Greek, and then to kind of have this other world opened up to you that has the richness of, well, this is where this comes from. This is where this comes from. Everything has a meaning to it. Everything has a story to it.
Yeah, and it's so beautiful, like to see how these people not only had them, how to say, the richness in imagination to create these archetypes, but how, like, they perceive the language, that, like, the symbols of the language, the sound, everything is so rich
Mm,
into meaning.
mm,
That's
mm.
so beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, it gets me to this sense, you know, we have this assumption that, or I have this assumption, right? Because the world's so kind of disjointed and quite linear, and we think, okay, well, somebody came up with a computer and they had this idea, and it's very very tangible in that sense, and we don't see a computer as a manifestation of the sacred, right? I mean, you could push that, but it would be a fairly forced assumption, right? Certainly that the original creators or inventors of computers had that in mind. And when you go back to not just ancient Greek, but many ancient civilizations, this idea that the language, the stories, everything was within an overall worldview. So it was all, it was very cohesive. It was very integrated, right?
Exactly. And we can see it that way. Like we can see that we are in the Aquarium Age, and Uranus is this god in astrology also that creates so much disruption and so many changes, and also is the god of technology.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you, Uranus, for bringing us your gifts, and we can talk right now.
Exactly. Yeah. It's so interesting because we have these senses of, because I think the other thing, I mean, yeah, because we were able to talk on this technology, and people are able to listen to this across the airwaves wherever they are, across networks and downloads, and here we are, hundreds or a couple thousand kilometers away from each other, and able to create this conversation. And yet there's also the potential for everything that bad that can go with it, and that I think is the other real benefit of mythology and these archetypes. They tell stories for both sides, right? It goes back to you were saying, it's not that there's a good or a bad. There are options, right? And you can use things to advantage or disadvantage. You can fall to the good side, or the yeah, the useful or the non-useful sides. Like what are you, goes back to that thing around intention. It's like, what are you using this for? Are you using, like magic, you're invoking gods and goddesses, and are you practicing white magic or black magic? Are you using this for the betterment of just yourself, which you can do? And we see that all around us, right? Our world is so caught up with this idea of, well, it's got to be about me, and I've got to take it from me because nobody else is going to provide it, and if I don't, this other person's going to win and I'm going to lose. And we're seeing much more this sense of, in lots of ways that are, and technology allows this. Well, we can all be connected. There is no win. It's just what it means to be connected, to create joy, to create connection, to create love, right?
Very, very true what you say. Well, I definitely invoke from a place of service. So I call myself a priestess because I consider as my job is to become this conduit, this vessel, in order to serve people, to serve like the light. So it's always about that. And that is always the intention I have. And whatever comes from the heart, it's always, it's when you consider yourself a vessel, then the ego goes out. It's not about you. Like, even if people don't like it, it's not about me. Even if people have a bad experience, it's not about me. Even if people have a good experience, it's not about me.
Yeah, and I can't remember who. I mean, my mentor talks about this as a writer, right? And there are few, although very few, but musicians and actors who say the same thing, right? Because it's so common to get caught up on. You may have a book or a movie or a song or a workshop that sells like crazy and everybody loves it and thinks it's the best thing, and that can go very quickly to the ego. Look at what I did, look at who I am, look what I created. And then conversely, we beat ourselves up when the second book doesn't do so well, the next movie doesn't sell, or all these things. And there is this thread that is talked about by many, and maybe not that many, but enough, who say it's not about me, right? I am, like you say, a conduit. The spirit just moves through me, and really the trick, because our ego, our humanness gets in the way, and we want to make it be something or look good, and the real trick is getting out of our own way and just being that that copper wire conduit. The electricity can travel down other materials, but copper is the best conductor for that, right? And it's the cleanest. And so when we can be like that for whatever we choose to bring into the world, whether it's music, whether it's poetry, whether it's workshops or dance or parenting, whatever it is, cooking, whatever joy and that is true from our hearts.
Yeah, it's an act of service.
Yeah, really interesting that because when it comes from that as a service, that's the overriding sense of it.
Yes.
Cool, Christina. Well, I think this has been a beautiful act of service that we have created here today. I feel very honored, very touched to have had you on. It's been a great conversation. I have learned a lot. I'm very grateful for your words, for your service, and
thank you for inviting me, and I'm very enlightened by your presence and your curiosity and your willingness to also serve.
With that, thank you, and we'll see you somewhere down the road.
Okay.